The year 2025 became a year of unprecedented strikes by the defense forces against the enemy's strategic targets, both in scale and geography. From the Baltic Sea to the Caspian, from strategic aviation airfields deep in the rear to the shadow fleet in the Mediterranean. Ukraine has proven that it can reach the aggressor. Anywhere. Fires at oil refineries, the destruction of bombers, and strikes on submarines. A new reality for the Russian war machine. Sofia Zelinska will tell you about the year's most high-profile operations.
The most stunning event of the year was the special operation by the security service of Ukraine called Web. On June 1st, Ukrainian drones simultaneously attacked 4 key air bases deep in the rear of Russia. Bila, Olenya, Diaghilevo, and Ivanovo.
A total of 41 aircraft were hit, including strategic bombers Tu-95 and Tu-160. Estimated damages exceed $7 billion.
This operation was prepared for more than a year and a half. According to sources, FPV drones and mobile launchers disguised as wooden houses were secretly transported into Russian territory, from where the strike was carried out. The logistical complexity and audacity of the operation placed this operation on par with the most renowned actions of the world's intelligence agencies.
The preparation of the drones and the houses took place just a few kilometers from the FSB office in one of the Russian regions. These houses were loaded onto trucks and sent to airfields where strategic bombers were stationed.
The enemy suffered equally painful blows at sea, where the geography of Ukrainian operations extended far beyond the boundaries of the Black Sea Basin. Back on January 4th, drones, having covered 900 kilometers, paralyzed the operation of the oil terminal in the port of Ust-Luga on the Baltic Sea.
That's just a mattress. It's moving. And
it turns out it was a drone that flew in.
Also this year, for the first time in history, the underwater drone Sapsi Baby struck a Russian submarine of the Varshavyanka class, a carrier of Kaliber missiles.
As a result of the explosion, the submarine suffered critical damage and was effectively put out of commission. There were 4 cruise missile launchers on board the submarine. Kaliber missiles which the enemy uses to strike Ukrainian territory.
The cost of such a submarine reaches $400 million. This attack forced the command of the Russian fleet to look for even more remote and, as they believed, safer harbors for the remnants of their ships.
Let us recall the damaged submarine was forced to stay in the port of Novorossiysk due to successful special operations. Surface marine drones Sea Baby, which drove Russian ships and submarines out of Sevastopol Bay in temporarily occupied Crimea.
But there are no safe places left for the enemy anymore. On December 19th, SBU operators struck the tanker Kandil, which was part of Russia's so-called Shadow Fleet. And they did it in the neutral waters of the Mediterranean Sea, 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. The vessel which Russia used to circumvent sanctions and finance the war suffered critical damage.
Russia used this tanker to bypass sanctions and earn money that was then spent on the war against Ukraine. Therefore, from the perspective of international law and the laws and customs of war, this is an absolutely legitimate target for the security service of Ukraine. The enemy must understand that Ukraine will not stop and will strike them anywhere in the world, wherever they may be.
However, this is not the only strike against the Russian fleet. This year, the sea has often been a hotspot.
December 15th, the Varshavyanka submarine was hit in Novorossiysk. June 3rd, the third strike on the Crimean Bridge. The structure is in an emergency condition. December 19th. A tanker from Russia's Shadow Fleet was destroyed in the Mediterranean Sea.
At the same time, the defense forces continue to systematically destroy the economic foundation of Russian aggression, its oil refining industry. Over the course of the year, more than 140 attacks were carried out on oil refineries and depots. And the strikes kept reaching deeper and deeper. Drones reached as far as Bashkortostan, Komi, and even Tyumen, which is 2,000 kilometers from the border. The result was the largest fuel crisis in modern Russian history. By autumn, nearly 40% of oil refining capacity had been put out of commission. More than 50 Russian regions felt the gasoline shortage. Gas stations saw kilometer-long lines, and in occupied Crimea and the Far East, fuel sales limits were imposed. Additionally, on the night of December 28th, the Syzran oil refinery in the Samara region was hit. In September alone, drone attacks halted the operations of 4 more major Russian plants. The Kinev plant in the Kaliningrad region, the second largest in Russia, was shut down on September 14th. The Ryazan oil refinery, owned by Rosneft and among the top 5 in Russia, was shut down on September 5th. The Novokuybishevsk oil refinery shut down on September 20th. And the Astrakhan gas processing plant of Gazprom shut down on September 22nd. The past year has once again proven that Ukrainian defense forces are capable of carrying out complex, multi-stage operations at any distance. Russian strategic bombers, submarines, oil terminals, and plants that finance the occupiers' army are no longer safe. Ukraine continues to systematically destroy the enemy's military and economic potential. Of the enemy, Sofia Zhelinska, Podrobnosti, Inter-TV channel, United News.
Next, we will talk about drone attacks. Drones attacked Moscow. One of the drones crashed into a high-rise building just 6 kilometers from the Kremlin and the Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country. Enemy electronic warfare forced the drone to land directly into a residential building. Residents were evacuated, debris was scattered around the buildings, windows were shattered, and one of the apartments was destroyed. According to monitoring channels, the drones maneuvered over the city at extremely low altitudes and overcame the dense air defense system that had been brought to Moscow from all over the country ahead of the symbolic May 9th parade for Putin. Also, explosions were heard in Samara last night. The Russian offensive failed. Instead of advancing, they are retreating from Ukraine's defense forces. This is according to a report by the Institute for the Study of War. Analysts note that during April, Russian troops lost control over 116 square kilometers. The armed forces of Ukraine are conducting successful ground counterattacks, disrupting enemy logistics, forcing the invaders to defend where they had planned to attack. Experts from the institute add that spring rains have turned the ground into mud, causing Russian mechanized units to become bogged down in such a trap. And the Russians carried out an unusual attack in the Kiev region. Serhiy Fleshk-Bezkresnov, advisor to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, stated that after a long break of several months, the occupiers massively used Parodia decoy drones. Their task is to distract the attention of Ukrainian air defense. That's why dozens of such drones were circling over the region. Bezkresnov added the defense forces are analyzing, studying, and of course countering the new tactics of drone use. Andriy Tkachuk, an officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a political scientist, is now joining the National Marathon broadcast. Mr. Andriy, welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you, and greetings to you as well.
Let's begin by looking at the drones over Moscow. Moscow is considered one of the most well-protected cities in the world. Given that Putin's May 9th celebration is just around the corner, there are even more air defense systems stationed there now. How in general are our unmanned drones able to overcome this kind of sophisticated multi-layered defense system?
Well, according to various intelligence sources, the Russians have strategically positioned and deployed more than 200 air defense units specifically to protect Putin on Red Square so that they can still hold Victory Day, which is this incredibly symbolic day for them. The fact that they are going to hold the parade anyway remains a confirmed reality. In other words, the Russians will not give this up because this is the foundation of their ideology, the basis of the propaganda they impose on their population. They have to convince the population further in their struggle and war against Nazism and fascism, which they are defeating, which they continue to overcome, and they have to tie all these things together. In other words, the propaganda there will do its job. There can be no doubt about that. Even the fact that there won't be any equipment on display there is not a big deal. On television, everything will be shown the way it should be. Experts will explain it as needed and the right image will be created. But the point is that it's clearly obvious Putin is afraid for his own personal safety and for what might potentially happen directly on May 9th. And in fact, the specific appeal he made to Trump at the very end of last week, specifically in regards to the wish and proposal for a ceasefire on May 9th, is also certainly not something he did without a very clear reason. He wants to ensure his own personal safety, so that there is definitely a completely stable and calm situation in Moscow. But things didn't go as planned. And our drone, which reaches Moscow, clearly shows today that we can reach it, that we have the capability, that we have increased our abilities, and that we are developing our capabilities. And even this large number of air defense systems did not stop our single drone. And the question isn't about the advisability of strikes on Moscow, because if we look at it globally, I always repeat, it's more effective for us to strike oil refineries and the military-industrial complex. But as of today, this strike is justified. Why is it justified? Let's go back to what I said, that Putin is very afraid. Air defense systems are being concentrated around Moscow, and they will try to protect the city as much as possible. At this moment, air defense systems have been pulled out of the regions, and it benefits us to escalate the situation around Moscow so that as many air defense systems as possible are withdrawn from the regions and concentrated around Moscow, and let them wait. Whether our drone flies to Moscow or not is a secondary issue. The key point is that they will strip their regions bare, expose their flanks, and we will be able to effectively and thoroughly strike Russian oil refineries and strategic defense industry enterprises. And we truly need to take advantage of this golden opportunity, this golden card, to strike Russian strategic targets as much as possible.
And today, our President Volodymyr Zelensky really turned up the heat by stating that our advanced drones could fly over the military parade in Moscow on May 9th. I have another important question regarding these recent Russian attacks. This very unusual attack on the Kyiv region, where they use sophisticated decoys and these realistic mock-ups. The Russians have these Geran drones, which they often use during their massive aerial attacks to distract our air defense systems. Well, I mean, it is basically just plywood, right, which flies and essentially doesn't pose a direct threat, but it constantly distracts our soldiers, wastes our ammunition, and so on. So why did they develop a decoy? Is it actually cheaper to operate?
Well, look, this is an absolutely natural element in the development of drone systems. Why do we have so many different drones? Well, I mean, there are some manufacturers. If you look into this issue, you might find that someone lobbied for a particular drone so that it would be purchased and used. But in this case, this question is actually not interesting at all. The more they spend, the less money they actually use. The point is that they are using them. Why are they using them? Because in fact, over the past few months, the air defense system has proven its effectiveness. Its effectiveness has really increased in certain cities, especially in the capital. The effectiveness of repelling enemy attacks has increased specifically in the capital. Yes, indeed, the situation is more difficult in the frontline cities, and we are still continuing to build up the capabilities of our short-range air defense in order to shoot down Shahed with our interceptor drones. But for example, in Kyiv, where they used a substantial quantity of, well, drones and decoys, these so-called, these needs, phantoms, or whatever they call them, well, parodies, it doesn't really matter at all. Accordingly, this indicates that they are trying to find ways to bypass our air defense system and, as a result, are using a greater number of decoy drones, employing various relays and additional means because we are improving, we are developing, we are demonstrating effectiveness in shooting down enemy drones. Accordingly, they are looking for ways to get around this, how to bypass our solutions and still reach their targets.
Mr. Andriy, the Russian offensive in April showed a negative trend. This has also been noted by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. Is this more about our actions or about internal problems within the Russian army?
No, here it's really a matter of our actions. When there's something to praise ourselves for, we should praise ourselves. We won't put on rose-colored glasses or start underestimating the enemy because the Russians do have capabilities and resources that they are using in the Pokrovsk direction, pressing on the agglomeration where they are putting pressure on Kostiantynivka. But there really are moments when we manage to seize some initiative. In certain directions, we have indeed managed to secure a strong defensive line, managed to take up good positions, and in some places, managed to push the enemy back. And overall, we are increasing our capabilities to destroy the enemy. According to data from Madhya Bovdi, as of today, since December, we have eliminated 156,000 occupiers, meaning we have put them out of action, while they have recruited 148,000. So there is a positive trend in that we are depleting their reserves. Furthermore, this is happening in part thanks to the rapid development of the drone component. Pavlo Polisa, the deputy head of the president's office, stated that over the past year, from March 25th to March 26th, we have significantly expanded our operational capabilities regarding strike drones. And now, we use 30% more strike first-person view drones on the front line than the Russian Federation forces do. For every 100 Russian FPVs, we have 130. That's the average overall. Russians lead in some spots, but we lead in others. But if you look at the entire front line, that's the situation. Again, according to Polisa, we have increased our capabilities in the defense industry. More than 50% of the equipment used on the front line today is produced right here in Ukraine. So there is something to be proud of, there is room for growth, and we have achieved good results. But again, the enemy is not resting here. The enemy is advancing their offensive actions. Then I would like to remind you that in 25, they were reaping the rewards of their preparatory and offensive operations, which also began in May, June, and they started to reap them in August, September. These are the Dobropilia salients, the Huliaipol breakthrough, and the semi-encirclement of Pokrovsk. So we watch, we observe, and we do not lose focus on what is happening at the front.
And we are proud of our armed forces.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Andriy. Andriy Tkachuk, Ukrainian military officer and analyst, was in touch with the studio. Now for international events. Donald Trump wants to significantly reduce the number of American troops in Europe. However, according to the latest defense law passed by Congress, the Pentagon is not allowed to reduce the number of troops in Europe to fewer than 76,000 people. Also, for any reduction, the administration must submit a detailed risk assessment showing that such a move will not harm U.S. security or NATO interests, Fox News notes. Let me remind you, just the day before this, the Wall Street Journal reported that Donald Trump specifically ordered the Pentagon to withdraw about 5,000 American troops from Germany.